All right, so we are going to talk about the density of liquids lab. And before I get into the video, remember there are pre-lab questions on the paper that was given to you. Now for this lab, you don't really need a whole lot of equipment. We're going to use the triple beam balance, some DI water, a 10 mil graduated cylinder, and what's not shown now is an unknown liquid, which I'll talk about in a little bit. When you are working on this, you want to get the mass of the empty graduated cylinder before you put anything in it. Now when you put it, before you put it on the balance, you want to make sure that the balance is zeroed, so that line should match up. And this looks like it is. So put the graduated cylinder on there. Now when you're doing this, remember, start off with the heaviest weight first, and what you want to do is move that over. Make sure it clicks into place. You don't want to have it crooked. It wants to be fully settled. Now you could tell that 100 grams is too heavy for this because the balance went down like this. So what you do is move that mass back to zero and you go to the next one in line. 10 grams is not enough. 20 grams is not enough. 30 is too much. So we have to go back to 20 and again make sure it's fully settled in that place. And now you move the next one along and basically you do the same thing. Go to the point where it's too much. So 4 grams here was too much, so we back it back down to 3. Now the part that's a little tricky is you want to slide this little thing along and you want to do a nice easy touch. And you're going to move this along until that balances out. And I'm not going to spend the whole time doing that. You can also, if you want to, use a tip of a pencil to move this along because you don't want to keep bumping into it because it's going to take a while because you have to wait for this to settle. So you want to do this nice and easy. Once you have the mass of the graduated cylinder, that's what you're going to write here. And I would actually use that for all 3 trials because you're going to use the same graduated cylinder, which is why I wanted you to get the mass of the grad cylinder before you put anything in it. All right, so for the first run, just take some DI water, fill this up to somewhere between 9 and 10 milliliters, and do not spend a lot of time trying to get it exactly on 9 or 10, just anywhere in there. And you want to remember to read by the meniscus. Actually, I'm going to add a little more in there. And make sure you read it to the correct number of decimal places. So before you start to measure it, I'm going to get some air bubbles out of there. Before you measure it, figure out what the resolution is. What does each little line count as? Now for this, each little line counts as 0.1. And remember, when you're measuring, you go one place past what you know. So keep that in mind. So you read the volume off of here. And that's what you write down on the paper where it says volume of water. That's for trial 1. Get the mass again. And do the same general idea where you move the weights how I showed you already. Alright, now what you can do at that point is calculate the density. It tells you density is mass divided by volume, so grams divided by milliliters. Now you're done trial 1. What I think works well is just take this graduated cylinder, pour out a little bit of the water. I poured out a little bit too much. You basically want 2 lesser volumes. Now I poured it down to 6 and I think I'd rather have it a little higher. You don't want to get to really low volumes. Once you get down to like 3 milliliters or less, the percent error seems to jump up quite a bit. So I would do maybe between 9 and 10, and then maybe between 7 and 8, and then maybe between 6 and 7, something along those lines. Just don't go below 3 milliliters. And do the same process. Get the mass each time, read the volume. You can fill in the table and you'll have all of the data because the mass of empty graduated cylinder did not change. So you're getting the mass of it full, the volume of the water. The mass of the water is easy. You just do the mass of the cylinder and the water, subtract out the mass of the empty graduated cylinder, and that will give you the mass of the water. When you're doing this math, make sure you pay attention to whether you should go by decimal places or significant digits. You're subtracting to get the mass of the water, but then by the time you get down the density, you are dividing. Remember, there's different rules for that. Once you are done with the water, you can pour that out, and if you end up shaking out some of the water, don't just hold it by the plastic piece because your grad cylinder can fall out. So if you need to shake water out, what I do is make sure you hold the actual glass and shake it. All right, you don't want to break the grad cylinder. You're going to repeat the process with some unknown. Your teacher will give you the unknown, but the process is exactly the same. Do the same calculations and then you can answer the questions. These are the options for the unknowns. Now, some of these are a little greasy. So when you're done the lab, just washing them out with water won't get that stuff out of there. Your teacher will let you know if you have one that needs to be washed out with acetone. If your teacher doesn't tell you that, then just rinsing it out with water should be good enough and the liquid can go down the drain. And then at that point, you should be able to answer the questions on the back. And I think that should be everything you need for this lab. Make sure you do the pre-lab questions on the front again.